The night wind swept like a restless spirit across the plains, tugging at the tattered hem of Clara Benson's shawl as she trudged the final mile toward the faint light flickering on the horizon. Her boots sank into the mud, her skirt soaked through and heavy, clinging to her legs with every weary step. She could hardly feel her fingers anymore, but she kept her carpetbag clutched tight against her chest. That bag held all she owned in the world: a Bible missing its cover, 2 dresses, and a photograph of a man who once promised her forever. The ranch house appeared through the curtain of rain, just a dark shape against the storm, one lantern glowing in the window. Hope was a fragile thing, but it was all she had left. When she reached the porch, she paused beneath the eaves, breath shaking. Her reflection stared back at her in the small window pane, round face, damp curls stuck to her cheeks, eyes rimmed red from exhaustion. She thought of turning back, of finding a barn or a tree to sleep under, but she'd already come too far to give in to shame now. She knocked once, twice, 3 times. The sound seemed too small to wake anyone, swallowed by the thunder that cracked overhead. Then she heard footsteps, steady, measured, heavy, and her heart stumbled. The door creaked open, and warm light spilled out onto the porch, touching her face. The man who stood there filled the doorway, tall and broad, his frame outlined by the glow of the lantern he held. His shirt was open at the collar, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, and his voice, when it came, was rough as gravel. "You lost, ma'am." Clara blinked up at him, blinking away the rain that streamed into her eyes. "No, sir. I was told you might be needing help. I'm looking for work." He frowned slightly, studying her face, then her soaked clothes, then the carpetbag she gripped like a lifeline. "You came in this weather." "From where?" "The stage let me off at Miller's Crossing before sundown. I walked from there." "Miller's Crossing." He exhaled slowly, disbelief cutting through the weariness in his tone. "That's near 5 miles, ma'am." "I know." Something in her voice silenced his next question. He stepped aside, motioning her in. "Get inside before you drown." She hesitated for a moment, as if stepping into another man's home required more courage than the miles behind her. Then she crossed the threshold. The cabin smelled of wood smoke, leather, and something faintly sweet, warm milk, perhaps. The sound of a baby crying broke through the hush, thin and piercing, somewhere in the back room. Clara froze. Her heart twisted at the sound. She hadn't heard a baby cry since her own had not survived the winter 2 years ago. She tightened her grip on her shawl and swallowed hard. "Apologies for the noise," the man said, hanging his lantern on a nail by the door. "My girl's been at it half the night. She don't take kindly to sleep." He rubbed a hand across his face, weariness shadowing his eyes. The gesture made him look older than he probably was. She saw the ring of pale skin on his left hand where a wedding band used to sit, and understanding dawned. "You've got a baby to tend on your own," she murmured softly. "Since my wife passed, yeah." His tone carried no self-pity, only fact. "Ain't easy. The ranch don't stop runnin' just because life falls apart." Clara nodded, her gaze dropping. "I'm sorry for your loss." He gave a faint shrug. "I'm used to losin' things, ma'am. Comes with livin' out here." The fire popped in the hearth, and for a long moment, the only sound was the soft crackle of burning wood. He looked her over again, not the way other men had, with judgment or pity, but like he was trying to see what kind of soul stood before him. "You got a name?" he asked finally. "Mrs. Clara Benson." Her voice wavered slightly. "Widow." His brow softened. "I see. I can cook," she went on quickly. "Clean, sew, tend to the baby if you'll let me. I don't ask for much, sir, just a place to work and sleep. I'll earn my keep, I promise." He studied her face, then her hands, small, roughened by labor. He saw the truth in her words, the kind of desperation that didn't come from laziness but from loss. "What brings you this far west, Mrs. Benson?" Virginia was too full of ghosts, she said quietly. "And too few kind eyes. I thought maybe the frontier would have more need for women who work hard than women who fit some picture of beauty." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "No one marries a fat widow, sir. But I can work." Her words fell heavy in the small room, as though even the fire held its breath. He didn't speak right away. Outside, the wind moaned against the window panes, and the rain softened to a whisper. He looked toward the crib where his baby's cries had quieted to a sleepy murmur. Then he looked back at her, his expression unreadable. You walked through that storm with no guarantee anyone had opened the door. I've had worse nights, Mr. Dawson. Caleb Dawson. Mr. Dawson. She nodded once. Ain't no night worse than the one where you give up trying. He almost smiled at that, though the corners of his mouth didn't quite make it there. Sit, he said finally, motioning toward the table. You'll catch your death standin' in those wet clothes. She obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair as if afraid she might wear out her welcome. He poured her a cup of coffee from the pot near the fire, and when she took it, her hands trembled. The first sip burned her tongue, but she didn't mind. It was warmth, it was life. You're not afraid? He asked after a while, breaking the quiet. Of what, sir? Of being here, alone, with a man you don't know. Clara set the cup down carefully. Fear's a thing I ran out of a long time ago. The world already took what it could. The rest, I'll give on my own terms. Caleb nodded slowly, respect flickering behind his eyes. You got grit, Mrs. Benson. I got nowhere else to go. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Well, I can't pay much, but there's work enough for 2 hands. And a child needs more than a cowboy to raise her. Something fragile broke inside her at those words, a thread of tension she hadn't even known she'd been holding. I'd be grateful, she whispered. Spare rooms down the hall, he said, turning toward the crib. You'll find blankets in the chest. We'll talk more come morning. When he lifted his daughter into his arms, the baby nestled against his chest, quiet at last. Clara watched, her eyes softening. There was a tenderness in him that didn't match his rough exterior, and something about that contrast, about his steady gentleness, made her chest ache. Thank you, Mr. Dawson, she said, standing slowly. For opening your door. He met her gaze across the room, the firelight glinting in his eyes. Figure you've been standin' out in the rain long enough, Mrs. Benson. Time someone did. And for the first time in years, Clara Benson didn't feel like a burden at someone's doorstep. She felt seen. The storm outside eased, and somewhere deep inside her, the quiet began to settle, not the quiet of loneliness, but the beginning of peace. Morning crept softly over the plains, the kind of dawn that came wrapped in golden silence. Mist clung to the grass, and the horizon burned faintly pink before the sun broke through. Clara was already awake, her sleeves rolled, her hands buried in biscuit dough as the scent of frying bacon filled the kitchen. Behind her, baby Emily cooed from her cradle, watching with wide blue eyes that mirrored her father's. Caleb Dawson stood in the doorway, boots in hand, not wanting to break the quiet rhythm of the morning. He'd gotten used to waking to the sound of crying, to the emptiness that followed, to the endless grind of chores that felt heavier without a woman's touch in the house. But since Clara's arrival, the air felt different. It smelled of soap and bread and something gentler than he'd known in years. She didn't see him at first. Her dark hair was pinned in a loose bun, a few strands curling along her neck. The firelight played over her soft face as she hummed under her breath, a tune so low and sad it almost sounded like a prayer. Her dress was simple, the same dark one she'd worn the night she arrived, but somehow it seemed to belong here now, like she did. You're up early, he said finally, stepping into the room. Clara turned, startled. Old habits, sir. The sun don't wait for breakfast. He smiled faintly. You really don't have to call me, sir, you know. She looked down, wiping her hands on her apron. I was raised to be respectful. He took a seat at the table. Respect's one thing. Distance is another. Clara hesitated, then poured him a cup of coffee. I'm sorry if I've been too formal. Well, I've never been much good at being familiar. He took the cup, nodding in thanks. You're fine, Mrs. Benson. You've earned your place here. You don't have to act like a hired hand. Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her face. I don't. No. You've done more for this place in a week than most men I've paid for a season. She glanced toward the window, as if the morning light could hide her blush. I only did what needed doing. He leaned back, watching her. You did more than that. The sound of the baby fussing broke the silence, and Clara crossed the room at once, her hands sure and gentle as she lifted the child into her arms. Emily's cries stopped almost immediately as Clara began to sway softly, murmuring nonsense words that sounded sweeter than any lullaby. Caleb felt a pang deep in his chest, half gratitude, half something he didn't have a name for. When the baby finally drifted back to sleep, Clara laid her down and turned to find him still watching. You make that look easy, he said quietly. She shook her head. It's never easy. But it's simple. All a baby needs is someone who won't let go. Her words hung there, heavy with truth. Caleb looked away, swallowing hard. My wife used to say something like that, he murmured. Said love's just another kind of work. You don't do it when it's easy, you do it 'cause it's worth it. Clara's eyes softened. She must have been a good woman. She was, he said simply. You'd have liked her. They fell quiet after that. The baby slept, the fire whispered, and outside, a hawk circled in the morning sky. Clara went back to her dough, and Caleb finished his coffee, his thoughts turning in circles. After breakfast, he went out to mend the fence near the creek. By mid-afternoon, the sun was high and hot, and Clara came out carrying a basket with a jar of lemonade and a wrapped sandwich. Her skirt brushed through the grass, the breeze tugging at her shawl. Thought you might want something to eat, she called out. He wiped the sweat from his brow and grinned. You read my mind. When she handed him the food, their fingers brushed, and for a moment neither spoke. Her skin was warm, her eyes uncertain but bright. She turned away first, pretending to adjust her shawl. Place looks different, he said after a while, sitting on the fence rail and unwrapping his lunch. Cleaner. Feels more alive somehow. She smiled faintly. That's just a woman's touch. Men don't notice the little things, but it's the little things that make a place feel like home. He looked at her then, really looked. Is that what you're looking for, Clara? A home? Her breath caught. She hadn't realized how long it had been since someone asked her that. I suppose I am. Not a fancy one, just a place where I'm not in the way. Where someone's glad I'm there when the day ends. Caleb nodded slowly. Ain't that what we all want? The wind shifted, and the scent of her soap, lavender and wood smoke, drifted toward him. Something unspoken passed between them, soft as a sigh. By evening, when the chores were done and the baby had been fed, Clara sat by the fire, mending one of Caleb's shirts. The cabin glowed with lamplight. Outside, crickets sang, and the air was cool enough to make the flames comforting. Caleb came in, freshly washed, his hair still damp. He stood a moment in the doorway, watching her needle move in steady rhythm, her head bent in concentration. The sight made something inside him settle, a peace he hadn't known since before his wife's death. You work too much, he said quietly. She looked up, smiling a little. Work's all I've ever been good for. That's so. She nodded. My husband used to say I was too soft, too plain. Said no man wanted a wife who ate more than she spoke. She laughed once, but it was a fragile sound. Guess he was right. Caleb's eyes darkened. He crossed the room and sat beside her, his voice low. He was wrong. She froze, needle hovering midair. Pardon. He was wrong, he repeated. You ain't plain. And you sure as hell ain't soft in the wrong ways. You've done more to bring life back into this house than I thought possible. You think that don't matter. Her throat worked as she tried to speak. It's kind of you to say that, Mr. Dawson, but, he cut her off gently. Caleb. You can call me Caleb. She hesitated, then whispered it, Caleb. It sounded strange in her mouth, personal, almost dangerous. He smiled. That's better. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air between them charged. He reached out, his hand rough and warm as it brushed away the strand of hair that had fallen over her cheek. She didn't move, didn't even breathe. You came here talking about work, he said softly, but what you brought was more than that. You brought quiet, warmth. You gave my little girl a reason to smile again. Gave me one, too. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. No one's ever said that to me. Then the world's been blind. He let his hand fall away slowly, respecting the space between them. She stared at the fire, her heart beating hard enough she could hear it. For so long, she'd lived expecting rejection, expecting to be unseen. But here, under this roof, in this man's voice, she heard something else, something like belonging. I don't need anyone to marry me, Caleb, she said quietly, her voice trembling but sure. I just need to know I matter. He smiled, slow and certain. You already do. The baby stirred in her cradle, letting out a soft sigh, and Clara turned toward the sound. When she looked back, Caleb was still watching her, steady, kind, unafraid of what he saw. Outside, the wind died down. Inside, the fire burned low, its glow spreading across their faces. And for the first time in a long while, Clara Benson didn't feel like a widow or a worker. She felt seen. She felt alive. And though no promises were spoken that night, the silence between them was full of them.